Supply Network Dynamics, Chapter 7, the webinars part 2. New Product Development Projects, or NPD projects. These often fail. The challenge that you always have in these projects is that you have to manage a bit of a Bermuda triangle of cost, quality and time. And whenever you do a project, it's often, well, yes, you can have it sooner, but then it either will cost you more or the quality will be less. So there's an assumption that there's an inherent trade-off between these things. And sometimes that's right, sometimes it isn't, and quite often that leads to not so smart decisions. A typical product development behavior is actually quite a bit like this. So the original plan was to have the dotted line, but because of all sorts of reworks and productivity and quality feedbacks that weren't intended but just happened, actually the total staffing becomes higher and the total time becomes higher, and the product of that means a lot more costs. But it also takes longer, and if you look at the quality that is achieved, the fraction of the work that's been completely done and properly done, it's also often longer than was originally intended. And this is quite a typical case. And why? If you look at the numbers, then there are some studies that say that just 60% of these new product development projects actually are successful, that there has been very little improvement in this, and yet there is an entire industry of all sorts of formal project management processes, training, methods, techniques, that's an industry in itself, more or less, but apparently it isn't helping. So why are there still so many new product development projects failing, despite all these tools, despite all these well-trained managers? Are these tools providing the wrong information? Or is this information not used correctly? And if it is so, are people then right to be surprised when failure occurs? Or do these problems unravel slowly, so that the team fails to notice the data, the change in the data? Because that is what's happening in the case. If you look at the case, then the overall project lasted some 85 weeks. And in the first year, when Kim van Oorschot was sitting in the weekly meetings of the project management, there was zero reference to any notion that this team was losing slack in the project planning. And all of a sudden, after 1 year, there was the first mention, hey, we have no slack left at all. Whereas first we had quite some slack. And just a few weeks later, well, will we at all meet the project end? And then what really killed the project in retrospect was that, well, you know what, we'll do a better job next year. And it took another 24 weeks to actually cancel the project. But really, between week 53 and week 61 is the death of the project. So did they not see this with all these tools and all these sophisticated techniques and highly skilled rational people involved in this big project? Or what was happening? Were they boiled like a frog?